The final panel will address an important question. What are the key challenges in scaling women-focused workforce initiatives? And how can funding strategies address them? This panel will be moderated by someone who has been a big believer in this summit since day one, Perry Hewitt, the Chief Marketing and Product Officer at Data.org. The panelists will be Tamina Madon, co-founder of the Agency Fund, Ritu Narayan, founder and CEO at Zoom, Radhika Shah, co-president of Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs and founding co-chair of the United Nations Joint SDG Fund Breakthrough Alliance, and Miriam Rivera, CEO, co-founder, and managing director at Ulu Ventures. Fun fact, a lot of the panelists here are friends and have known each other for a long time.
So it's my huge privilege and pleasure to be here today. These are leading thinkers and doers who are actively improving women's workforce participation, and most importantly, and I think we've heard this as a theme today, improving their agency in work and life. I work with Data.org. We're an organization that focuses on data and AI for social impact and leverages the power of cross-sector partnerships to bring broader participation in what we see as a rapidly accelerating tech revolution. I may be old enough to remember the dot-com one, and the speed is definitely over time increasing. Like many of you, we work with different funding models, and we work with different kinds of funders to gauge impact measurement. I'm going to be very inappropriate, it's the end of the day, and channel Justice Potter Stewart, who in 1964 on a very different topic said, impact measurement is hard to define in words, but we all know it when we see it. I'd say my biggest disappointment in moving to the social sector is seeing the time and energy that people spend, whether that's funders or corporations or even SIOs themselves, seeking to define that one true metric. Like, what's that one number that proves what we're doing is good, instead of investing in scaling solutions that work measurably and making quick calls on ones that don't. I'm with Andy Grove here. There are a lot of strategy work still being done in PowerPoint that's taking years off the people's lives who are building it instead of saving the lives of others. But today we're not going to focus on disappointment, but on possibility. Ms. Irani said to us that misery should not have conferences, and I wholeheartedly agree. The women on stage with me make the implausible and the improbable very possible by bringing visionary ideas to implementation on tough social challenges, including women's workforce participation. I'm going to ask each of them 2 questions and ask they give really specific examples of what works, even when it doesn't fit neatly into the rubric we all show our funders. We're winding down at the end of the day, so I'm going to ask the timekeeper to keep me honest. That's you, Sakshi, I think. And then we'll wrap up with a few observations and a lightning fill in the blank. So let's get started. I'm going to pick on you first, Tamina, because you're closest. You funded diverse initiatives worldwide. Can you share examples of programs that have boosted women's workforce participation in the spirit of, like, what tangibly have you seen that works, and what the heck made them sustainable?
Good question. Well, I'll start with what we've seen work. And what I wanted to do is talk around the life trajectory of a woman and her family. I think what we haven't talked enough about today is the importance of childcare and providing access to state-funded and state-regulated childcare. We have funded Rocket Learning, which is a partner that is building India's Anganwadi system. It is the world's largest daycare provider with, I think, 1.4 million women working in daycare centers across the country. And what we've seen there is that when you upskill Anganwadi workers and also provide parents with digital tools that give them insights on how to care for their children, you see improved foundational literacy and numeracy in kids who are now going from preschool to kindergarten. But you also free up women to work, right? Women need care if they're going to contribute to the labor force. So that's one stage, is that I think we need to invest in childcare when children are small. And obviously there's evidence from business schools that women who run their own entrepreneurships, their own enterprises, are far less effective if they have a kid on the hip. And that's not surprising, but they can't communicate with their suppliers as reliably. They can't attend to their customers as well. And I'm referring to evidence out of Uganda and also India, observing women entrepreneurs and the struggles they face when they don't have childcare. So that's one piece. I think once you're in school as a young woman, there are a number of things we can invest in to make the transition to a livelihood a little bit smoother. One Susan Athey just talked about is mentorship. There's evidence that a lot of youth come from school into the workforce expecting to find a job right away and expecting a high wage. And sometimes mentorship helps you adjust your expectations to be a bit more resilient to the bumps along the road. And again, a study with BRAC in Uganda by a researcher who at the time was at Berkeley is finding that people who have a mentor can be more patient. They can persist longer and end up taking jobs that do get them on that first step on the rung of the ladder. So I think investing in mentorship is important. We heard about it this morning, but Suhani and others' work, Lisa and others, to show women that if you have the experience of going to work, you can bring your whole family with you. Often in South Asia, there are these norms around women being secluded, not going out of their homes for work. What often a family needs is the experience of letting the woman engage in work, seeing that it's actually not that much of a catastrophe. Mm-hmm. It brings in extra income. She maybe is feeling connected and feeling a sense of self-affirmation by being in the workforce. And so you just need to offer people those experiences. And that takes us to older age. I think even mothers-in-law and fathers-in-law need better support and understanding the legacy they leave when they enable a young woman to flourish. And some work by a psychologist here at Stanford named Ayo Dado has shown that in northern Nigeria, where there is a big problem with getting girls back into school and delaying their age at marriage, we also face that problem in India. Just appealing to the elders' sense of legacy, that they are the roots of a tree, but someday that tree is the granddaughter they have, whose mother made it to school, whose mother is educated, who's going to help her own daughter persist through school and find a job. In those cases, you see a big uptick in girls' attendance and a graduation from school and later marriage age. Well, that'll be the follow-up.
And I love the point you made really echoes with the woman earlier today. Said sometimes it's a 74-year-old man. Let's not keep pointing the finger at young men and say, hey, it's on you, buddy. You got to fix everything. So beyond funding a single intervention, how important is ecosystem building, partnerships with government, NGOs, private sector, to ensure these have systemic long-term impact? I mean, we think a lot about that at data.org. How do we bring the sectors together and make it work? But how do you think about building it as an innovative funder?
So increasingly, we are focusing on funding nonprofits or social entrepreneurs who have an elegant mechanism that they can leverage to scale. Either they have built political or bureaucratic relationships with government, they've figured out how to navigate the system, and now they're going to deliver programming through schools, through the Anganwadi, the daycare system. India is unique. It has a very strong presence, public sector presence, that can be leveraged. We have innovative NGOs that can improve those systems. But technology also is an elegant lever to scale, and where you can bring women onto platforms for digital gig work to deliver advice and counseling or mentoring. There are digital mentors that are being tested in a lot of places. We can scale through technology. The key is building delightful products that people want to use, because you are competing with everybody else on the smartphone that a woman holds.
And the Netflix and the couch.
Yes, and the YouTube and the political messages coming in on WhatsApp. So we focus on NGOs that either have strong product management capabilities and are really focused on delighting their users, or who have government savvy. And I guess the one thing that we would like to see, and I think it came up today, is more comfort engaging in political discussions where academia is involved. Research is unbiased, but the scaling of that research will never be unbiased. So can we get academics and politicians to be a little more comfortable sharing the same stage?
Yeah, great, thanks so much. So Ritu, turning to you as a for-profit entrepreneur, has done amazing work. You built a company with the mission of enabling more women to enter the workforce, solving a very specific and important problem aligned with childcare. Can you talk about how that vision informs your business model and operations?
My company Zoom was started here at Stanford GSB 10 years back. And before that, I was working for eBay, which is one of the largest marketplace, seeing how technology can really impact people's life. Like people sitting any corner of the world would be earning money on this platform. And I was wondering, I was always struggling to pick up and drop off my children while at work, and why nothing was done in that area using this wonderful technology and marketplace dynamics. And interestingly, the thought came at that time that 30 years before that, my mom had left the job for the same reason. So this whole issue is generational. it's societal, and it has never been changed. So that curiosity led to the founding of the company, and the idea was at that time 10 million women in US had left the job. And I realized like 2 million additional women during COVID left the job because of the same reason. So the impact is really large. For us, the development of the problem came through by having a deep insight and understanding of what women were looking for, and what the experience of all of our stakeholders, parents, children, everybody was, and that informed our vision, that informed everything. Right here at Stanford, actually, I was part of a course called Lean Launchpad, where I interviewed, even though I was the user, I interviewed hundreds of parents and walked through their lives of what would really make them use. Trust is such an important aspect. Timeliness and safety is such an important aspect. And reliability is such an important aspect. So unless you cater to the true feelings of why people will not let go of their child and go to work, it's such a critical thing. You will not be able to attract them to use the product. And interestingly, when we launched, people didn't know I started the company, but I used to randomly hear, wow, this product is so delightful. It feels like a parent developed it. And I was like, of course, a parent developed it. I was the early user and my kids were the early thing. Today, I mean, we have come a long way from where we are solving this problem for millions of parents around the country. We are in 18 states, serving 4,000 schools. And that early stage insight has never gone away of how to provide the trust, safety, and reliability on every single ride. Like we have done over 50 million miles at this point over the last 10 years in terms of taking kids from one place to another. But that basic insight of how to solve the problem, every single thing in our product that we think about on day to day, how our decisions are informed, come back to the same roots of how to change the experience of the student, how to change the experience of the parent. And I'll just tell you a normal thing, like on one hand, our lives are so modernized, like you can track your pizza, you can track your packages on your thing. But when you see here, like in US, even in US, in the public school transportation systems, when parents put their kids to the school bus, they have no idea where the kids are. And solving that problem brought so much reliability, and our customers are from all status of economic status, like they are people who are frontline workers, and they rely on the public education system. There are people who may be able to afford to drive their kids to the school. But no matter where you come from, when you have the reliability that your child will be picked up, they are able to go to the work. And that's what we have. And today the company is a very large logistics company and it has evolved.
Well, it's a level of security for both parents, right?
That's
we talk
right.
about things that benefit all parents as well as just women, and it definitely does both. So what kind of data do you use? I'll argue with Myna later whether all academic research is unbiased, but okay. But when you look at data, whether it's your internal data or external research from academia or others, well, what do you look at that really shows that your model is expanding employment opportunities? How do you measure that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one interesting thing is people don't realize this motherhood penalty that's there. And in the initial days, we used to call it about 4 p.m. problem, that the actual workforce is not designed the way the school system is designed. The school system gets over at 3:30 and it starts at a different time, and the work gets over at 5 or 6. And if you leave early, you look like you are not fit for having the promotions and you are not the right candidate for the job. And it's so interesting when Zoom started out, women started going back to work. They started saying, I used to go at 6, leave at 3. Everybody knew when I left, nobody knew when I came in. And that's what we basically started changing the narrative around it and making it happen. It is said that from the research, Oxfam research shows that even 1% decline in participation of women and leaving the job has an impact of around $150 to $200 billion on the economy. And think about it, like just in the COVID, we had like trillions of dollars of loss because of that happening. And our goal, that's what it roots us to. The second thing I would really point out to, it's not so related just to the company, but my experience being a founder, we all know that less than 3% of the venture funding goes to the women founders. And it's very daunting when you don't see the role models, you don't see the examples, because you can't be what you can't see. And in this, I would really want to point out, like Miriam here and Radhika, both were early investors in the company, and they, like, them being on the other side and me not seeing the not representation, what a difference they made, because today the company is one of the few unicorns in the country. And my idea was I would connect back to what Susan said about mentorship and doing something back, or investing, or being able to relate to the ideas. So that is something I really like. Today, I definitely, that metric is moving forward, but in the
a theme that keeps coming up in these conversations, in the hallway conversation, are the communities of women that support one another. I do a Pathways to Impact series on data.org, and that's a question I always ask her, like, what community bolsters your work? And it's so interesting to hear how often it's, Black and brown women in tech, or, mothers in my community I live in. It's not always tech related what makes them succeed. So Radhika, turning to you, you wear a lot of hats. You have a lot of interesting roles with Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs and the UN Joint SDG Fund. What innovative and intersectional gender inclusive approaches in financing are most effective in both shifting systems and scaling in the digital economy?
Yeah, I also want to continue the theme of focusing on peer networks, communities, and mentoring. You triggered this, Susan. All of us have been thinking about
Started
that.
a cascade.
And as I'm thinking of myself in the early days of my career in the world of tech, it was very lonely. The only professional networking was when people went to the bar at night, and mainly only the men went, and there was nowhere to go. And so I have been involved, along with my mentor, Miriam, here, in creating some professional peer and mentor networks here, communities where people around with common affiliations, common interests, and common purpose come together. And I think those are very underrated, so I want to talk about that as well. These are micro ecosystems here in Silicon Valley, but I think they're representative of what could exist in all parts of the world. One such group is Rajiv Circle, of which one of our mentors, Professor Rajiv Motwani, Stanford professor, passed away. Just to kind of deal with his loss and to continue a spirit of helping without any expectations, we started a group called Rajiv Circle. It grew like wildfire, about 500 members eventually from the world of tech. And what was amazing was we didn't have that much structured mentoring. Even the unstructured model works very well. We had a time, like there was office hours at a cafe in University Avenue. Anyone who had a problem from the group could come, and someone who wanted to be there and help would come. And it was one-to-many or many-to-many mentoring, problem solving, and it was amazing. And at that moment, the trust was so high in that community. And what is unique about this group is because of the nature of it and the founders, I think it's very important representation at the top and at every level. Because there were many senior women, co-founders were women, it was very gender inclusive. And that, I think, is critical. And the other such group is Stanford Angels and Entrepreneurs, founded by Miriam, which I'm part of, the leadership. And we have Trip here somewhere. Trip, just raise your hand if you're around, who's a newest member. As you can see, many women in the leadership. The group is another professional peer group. And it is about 3,000 plus Stanford alumni have come together to advance entrepreneurship tech innovation. It is also inclusive of both men and women. But what is unique is we don't hang out in bars. Our gatherings are often in Miriam's beautiful backyard. They are on campus, so they're very designed where everyone feels comfortable and feel like they belong, right? That sense of belonging is very important. And people meet in an organic way. They meet role models, they meet mentors, they meet peers, they meet co-founders, business partners, and amazing things come out of that. And for me personally, it has been huge being part of these communities, helping build, but also benefiting from them. And then that reminds me of Ritu's story. Ritu came by one day to my backyard. I knew her brother, and she was talking about this company, very early days, and I introduced her to Miriam. And then Stanford Angels, a few members invested, Miriam's company invested, and now she's we're so proud of Ritu, one of the most successful companies out of Stanford Angels. But that power of community is really underestimated, as well as on the financing. At Stanford Angels, we do also have a way where we also have structured and unstructured ways of helping the community. On the structured side, entrepreneurs like Ritu, when she came first, they pitched to angel members. And then again, organically connections happen in that pitch process, and whichever want to invest in the entrepreneur. So it's access to finances, but I think the underrated part is access to the mentors, the partners. And I have seen this work amazingly. I want to touch on zooming out to the world, the global south. One of my hats is founding co-chair of the Breakthrough Alliance of the Joint SDG Fund, which catalyzes funding in least developed countries for transformative change at a country level. 2 or more UN agencies, along with other partners, apply for the seed funding. And when they apply, one of the criteria is a marker. So if they're applying, say, for a clean energy transition for the country, the multiple markers have to satisfy, but always, no matter what the theme, one of the markers is a gender marker, and there is a score there. And they have to do well on that and get more than a certain score. And I'll give you examples on the clean energy transition. They have to show that both males and females will be equal beneficiaries from this transition. They have to make a very concrete case on that in the application. They have to show that there are actions there which will lead to, when new jobs are created from this transition, in equal participation in these jobs and decision-making around these jobs for women, and that in other ways is advancing gender equality. And this is a minimal criteria they have to show that they will clear before they get funding, whether it be for clean energy, whether it be for public health. And I do think bringing in this kind of gender-centric focus in systems change really, really helps. It's not just the funding, and it's not just that these 3 things happen. It's creating that awareness in all the partners coming together in the ecosystem that this is important, and it's not just about women, but it's about the gender inclusion, that men and women are thought of as equals and get equal opportunities.
It makes me think of that earlier comment of it's easier to change institutions than people, creating those kinds of metrics and baking them in. I want to go to one real specific example, which is RYSS or REIS, how you've scaled in one state and you're expanding your model elsewhere. Can you tell us more about the program? We're a little short of time. And then what factors you believe really made it work in the state and then be able to scale, which is what this panel is all about.
RYSS is an initiative of the Andhra Pradesh government in India. And it is one of the largest agroecology programs around community-managed natural farming. It's innovative in that it's creating an ecosystem where climate-resilient, sustainable agricultural system is being put in place. And it's, as I understand, over 4,000 villages and 10 million plus men and women are involved in this. And no pesticides, no herbicides, no fertilizers are used. Biostimulants are used as catalysts and diverse crops. A lot of nature-based solutions, but also new innovations and huge environmental benefits. And what is powerful here is that this leads to many of these farmers are women, leads to huge agency and improved livelihood for the women. And they show it's improving their community's health as well and more nutritious diet. But what is unique here in what has made this program succeed and scale is that this is grounded and really anchored in women's self-help groups. And these self-help groups are the way that the knowledge about this kind of farming spreads from woman to woman. And they also have one of the core elements of success is that they're identifying what they call champion farmers, the best farmers, and then identifying and then coaching them and making them the catalyst for the change, for the knowledge sharing. And as it turns out, many of these are women. And so the strengthening of the community knowledge is key, and it's through these farmers. And this also, I think, one of the key things that helps and succeed is that this is anchored within a way of livelihood, the agriculture that's already part of the community. So it's easier to get the women into these kind of, in the same kind of livelihood than some models where it's a very different kind of livelihood models being brought in. So I think core to the success here is this 3 types of catalysts. And that is one of the things I think for entrepreneurs looking at scalable solutions is there's a people catalyst, there's a process catalyst, and then there is a technology catalyst. And they have very well identified these 3 catalysts and then found kind of pathways to activate these catalysts. And that's something I think really helps scale such innovations. My own link is there only as with one of my other initiatives, the UN Joint SDG Fund. We are looking at helping that initiative build bridges with this kind of these places. And they will probably be coming out to Stanford in a couple of months. Anyone interested, happy to make connections.
Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much. So, Miriam, I don't know how you have time to run Hoover Ventures since you're mentoring half the people in this room, but I know that you invest primarily in U.S.-based companies. From your work in the U.S., what do you think could apply or scale to the Global South or other regions of the world?
Well, I do think that we have looked at a lot of areas that are probably some of the same things. I have worked in the not-for-profit sector, then I work in tech and have worked in venture capital. And access to capital in the US is also a big issue. Only 1.4% of all the dollars in the US that are managed by funds of various kind are managed by women or people of color. That's here, 1.4%. So this is not an unusual problem, and I think the same kinds of challenges apply, and we try to look at them at scale. So transportation for kids was one issue. Elder care is another issue that we've looked at as well. Child care is another issue. Obviously, companies like food delivery have really changed, I think, some of the things that women are typically responsible for, like purchasing groceries, food preparation, other kinds of things like that have been venture-backed. And, you know, in Asia, actually, food delivery was already a thing much bigger than here in the US for a lot longer. But I think those kinds of solutions can be scaled. We haven't succeeded in every case, right? Childcare is a very labor-intensive thing. We've tried to do it through a model where we could do larger apartment-based urban childcare in buildings that could provide housing for the caregiver, because that's one of the reasons why it's so expensive. People can't afford to live in the places where they could work near kids. But even that proved to be a non-tenable financial model. It would need subsidization in order to make it work. But for example, elder care is another thing where women are often the most responsible. You know, I helped take care of my mom for 28 years. My sister and I were a team. She was doing a lot of the physical care, was doing a lot of the financial care, interaction with systems like hospital, doctors, et cetera. So one of our companies, Mon Ami, is focused on trying to help states and cities to be able to manage the care to the elderly in those communities. They are typically working through not-for-profits, but they need systems to be able to, at scale, understand what's happening on the ground. Is the food getting there? Is the home visit happening? Did the person see the doctor? Those kinds of things need to be kind of coordinated, and they're helping to make sure that those elders are taken care of, because people can't do good work when they're worried. Mm-hmm. You know, I kind of laugh at what you said about taking your child to work. The first 4 months when I had a child as a startup founder back in the 90s, I took her to work. I was actually asked to leave my own startup. I think in part, well, I was told it was, people thought, well, if it was my grandchild, I'd like the mother to stay home, right? So that was even in the late 90s here in Silicon Valley. Wow. These experiences are one of the reasons why I really have focused on, are there ways which we can use the for-profit model to help address some of these issues so that we can get more women to remain in the workplace. Another thing that we focused on have been labor marketplaces, such that people who have skilled work but often choose to leave the workplace because it's too difficult to manage their own children and taking care of their own children as well as working, but may be able to work part-time remotely. For example, speech-language pathology is an area where a lot of pathologists were leaving schools. There were shortages of those people in schools. And if they could work from home and they would have credentials that would allow them to potentially operate in different states, we could do that in a more scaled version. So that is a kind of a startup that had, you know, I would say middling success. It scaled, it helped tens of millions of children, but in venture we call that a middling success. But I think it helped solve a real social problem and a real need. Same thing with substitute teachers, another thing that obviously education is one of the biggest ways in which we can change the future of boys and girls. And particularly if we don't lose time in the work day with parents like not having adequate teaching in the classrooms, et cetera. So we've looked at a lot of different approaches that help to improve the things that women are typically in our society expected to be present for and to be providing to the family and overseeing that the kids are getting, adequate education, transportation, and other kinds of skills. And those ways, I think, are scalable through technology often.
And realize some savings, because a ton of money is going into those things, childcare and elder care. So is there a way it can be better spent? So last question, when you're evaluating startups that aim to empower women, are there particular indicators or signals that you look for to say like, ooh, I think this could do long-term growth and impact? Whether it's founder characteristics or business characteristics might be interesting to hear.
Yeah, we definitely try to look at problems that are just big problems that have large dollars associated with them. When we met Ritu, we had no idea that busing for kids was literally the biggest transportation system in the United States of America. Wow. Who thought? Nobody really understood that. So one is, does it have a big market? And then this, I can't emphasize enough how much the founder fit to the problem is such an important aspect of the success of a company. Ritu had obviously lived this problem. I had lived this problem, I'm sorry, back there. And I had even been an early adopter. Like there was a mom in my neighborhood who drove a car to school and was paid by different moms to do it. Didn't think of it as a personal business opportunity to pursue, but when Ritu was thinking about doing it at scale, I was like, yes, I know, there are so many kids in my neighborhood that would have wanted to be able to, or their families would want them to be able to do this, but there was only one mom that offered this service, right? So it was one of those things where the founder had, you had done hundreds of interviews with parents. You really understood what was going on in the market. The other thing that we were really surprised by was the capital efficiency with which the company was addressing the problem. There was a similar company in business at that time called Shuttle with 2 Ds and dogs, and it was shuttling kids, and it was using Uber and Lyft drivers to transport kids. And it had a lot of the same insights that people really wanted to get their kids to school, but not the empathy that I think Ritu developed by talking with parents, by having a lived experience of the problem of, I really need to make sure my kid gets to school. Some of these kids were being left behind because there was a higher rate over here. And anybody, I have, unfortunately, I think there were a couple times when I was late to pick up my kid at daycare. And I can't tell you how sad a kid is who's the last child left, and how you will do anything to try never to have that happen to you as a mom, right? And literally one time I was actually speaking in front of the entire Google company, and they were delayed, and so I was late to pick her up. And you're just in this conflict about how do you manage having to do your job and also be there for your child in an appropriate way. But that founder fit, the empathy with the problem, the real deep compassion to the parents, I think was just something that was really helpful. And another insight for us, in the US, we often have kids that are living in multiple homes. They may have 2 parents that are not actually living together. They may have a relationship with a grandparent, another caregiver that is providing housing for that child. So this ability to actually know where your kid is when they leave somebody else's home is such a real reassurance. So I think those were some of the things, the founder fit to the problem, the capital efficiency. Shuttle had raised something like $10 to $12 million to generate 60,000 rides. Ritu and her brothers, who she started the company with, had generated 20,000 rides with $250,000. So really smart use of capital as well was something that just was very appealing.
Thanks. I love the way you
May I
went
ask Miriam a question?
Yeah, sure. In a minute.
Miriam, because we were earlier talking, Perry, about what is there technology innovations that can help with the women's workforce deployment. And I wonder, Miriam, if you were touching on your ULU decision analytics model, because I was thinking that can really help tackle human bias that often investors, it can kind of unwittingly, women often get left out. And having seen it, I think it's amazing having participated.
Yeah. So one of the ways we use a methodology called decision analysis that was developed here at Stanford University by Professor Ron Howard in the School of Engineering. And it's an approach where we try to develop a picture of the market opportunity of a company. This can be used for projects as well, for not-for-profit projects, right? Where you're trying to understand, as long as you can either quantify the value of people served or jobs held or some other way that you know what your unit of maximization is, you can look at what the market opportunity is. In our case, we have to look at things like dilution, exit multiples, et cetera, to try to figure out what an opportunity looks like at the end. And that's one way that we are able to understand whether something is scalable, whether it would meet the kind of hurdle rate that we have for investment, and also to prioritize projects, right? So if I have a potential opportunity that's looking like it would be a 20x compared to a 10x, I know that I should spend my time first on the 20x. And I think all of us in for-profit or not-for-profit have to make the best use of time, which is really the scarcest resource anyone has.
So it's like data-informed triage.
Yes.
It's great. So I'm just going to do a quick wrap-up of what I heard today. There are many tremendous insights. So for me, the three big things were, can you identify the pressing problem, whether that's childcare or transport? Don't fall in love with the technology. What's the real underlying problem? And look for founder fit with that problem. Can you leverage existing systems, like whether that's self-help groups or strengths of the community like agriculture, so you're working sort of with the tide versus against the tide? And throughout all the panelists see that mentoring matters, whether that's senior colleagues who are devoting their time and attention to you, or you're forming peer learning groups to share learnings amongst each other. Those are the three big things I heard, but I'd love to know what the audience heard. We have time for, I think, 2 questions if we go quickly. Please, go ahead.
I have a question to founders and investors, I guess. Are we creating a shrinking group of women for women? Do you think that men are not capable of solving the transportation problem? And do you think women are not capable of solving deep tech problem? I guess what I'm wondering is, in today's discussions all day, we're talking about how we need to step up and mentor our friends. And I think that's fantastic. But I think we need to go out to a broader community because we just have the available people out there. I'm wondering whether we unwittingly, even today, bias women for solving softer problems. We do a great job as women. We understand so many more dimensions. But I think there's a lot of smart women out there who need to stand up and solve the manufacturing problems, and men who can really stand up and say, I supported. And I'm just going to use a terrible example here, but when Naveen Chadha from Mayfield stands up and says, I want to do this for women, he's setting an example. And I need a lot of more men need to come out there and do that. And I'm wondering whether as investors, we should stand up and say, I want to see more on the table, right? Just want to know what you guys think of that.
I want to add to that. It's very interesting you asked this because I used to work at Oracle. I'm actually a computer engineer undergrad. I was 6 women out of a class of 300 and worked in very technical fields at Oracle, Yahoo, and then eBay, when this whole view into the new world of platform that could really help people across the world came to me. And when I was moving into this idea, the doubt in my mind was, am I moving away from technical to something very soft, like exactly what you said? And when I go for investment, all the men out there would laugh at me and say, this is a nanny problem. Why are you solving it? And surprising thing was that along the way, everybody faced the same problem. Even though we said women, but parents. Essentially, people are able to associate to the problem because they are parent and they say their wives or their sisters or their mothers face the same issue. the contribution, the reason I've mentioned Miriam in particular was in early days, it's very hard because the representation is not there. It's very hard to trust anybody and give the money, big money immediately. When Miriam put $250,000 and she went to Sequoia Capital and where she worked at Google and told her coworker, hey, this is the company you have to see. What a difference it made. All of my rest of the investors were male investors, top companies, but it made. So I just wanted to close the circle on that. Like, women should absolutely do bigger problems and things, but nobody will solve these problems if we don't have belief that 50% of the population is women and you can solve your problems and they're big.
And that'll let them get into deep tech. I think we get one more comment that we're
So I
getting the
just
stop
want
sign.
to say that this is a big technical problem.
Right.
Like think about like all the
deep tech.
logistical issues that are involved in collecting that many
Right.
kids and getting them to school on time in traffic. And then in addition, she's also solving an energy problem, right? So like, and using solar power to help create backup battery systems and grid, what is it called now?
Grid resiliency.
Grid resiliency, right? So like she's solving multiple problems, and 40% of our teams have a woman on the team. They're solving a huge number of problems. I'm focused today on some of the questions that I think are more scalable for issues that impact women in the workplace, because that was an investment thesis that for me was significant because I saw how many women drop out of the workforce over a career, right? Like I've been a working woman and mother my whole life. I started working at 13. I'm at 61 now. And it's just so rare to actually be able to have women colleagues. And if we don't address those real issues, we really lose that talent and that intelligence in our workforce, our society, government, everywhere, and to me, that is a real loss to everyone. And I 100% agree with you that men need to be part of the solution. And I also think that a lot of the times, if we don't do it for ourselves, probably nobody will do it either. So there's a balance there. And for example, one of the reasons I started a firm was because there just weren't women-led firms. And so I thought, okay, if it's going to be, it's going to be up to me, right, to actually create it. And I think we have to go out there and create the things that we want to see and the solutions we want to see in the world.
Great. Hear, hear. Great note to end on. Thank you so much to our panelists.